Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to continue from the place we stopped last week, and last time we have done almost we have finished the Chitta Rūpa chapter, and we covered quite considerable range of topics regarding Chitta Rūpa and related to them. And last time we talked how Chitta Rūpas are related to bodily and verbal actions. And today I am going to open a discussion or a topic related to the self-view of a doer, self-view or a wrong view of a doer, which we call Karaka Ditti in Pali, and how this is related with or connected with Chitta Rūpas, especially the intimation and the Chitta Kiriya Vayu Dhatu. I'll be taking this for 2 weeks, and then I'll move on to another interesting topic, which is called Rūpas related to Chitta, but they are not directly the Chitta Rūpas, but the matter that is related in one way or another with Chitta. So today's topic, I think I have shared the handout in the group. That was the repetition of the same handout which was shared a few days ago for the last few classes. The topic would be in page number 4. Chetana, volition, Chitta Rūpa, mind-born matter, and the Karaka Ditti, view of a doer, how they are related. In this regard, we should know the common folks belief, that's called folk psychology. What do we think about ourselves or our activities? We tend to believe that there is a person inside the body or manifesting as the body, and who represent ourselves. And that person acts according to its will or his or her will. That is the normal idea that we believe in, and we act upon, or we lead our life based on that ideology. Buddha has said that this thought pattern is something against the reality, because as he put forward, there is no self or a being that we can locate or we can designate as an entity, because one of the peculiar or the foremost features of a living being, which we call I or self, is the oneness. Either this person or this thing has been existing as a one entity, a single entity throughout this entire life. And some believes on life after death, where this I would, or the person entity would travel like a bird flying from a tree to another tree, or some believe that this entity would end up at the death. There are some other doctrines like modern science, physics especially, which doesn't believe in a self, which only talks about physical entities, which also negates the consciousness, which doesn't address about the consciousness, but everything is physical. That's we call physicalism. And there's another view that doesn't talk about consciousness, eliminative, something like that. There's another extreme physicalist view. So anyway, so according to them, there is no self, only physical entities such as the quarks and leptons exist, and with the bosons, and there's nothing that transforms, or there's no connection from one life to another. And there's the talk about afterlife, after death life, afterlife, another life doesn't make any sense to them. So, but even they themselves, who advocate this materialism, emotionally believe in a self, that because if something happens to them or their family, they feel it like it has happened to themselves. So in the emotional level, almost every being, unless he has overcome this defilement, being a noble person. All the Puthujjanas believe in or live based on the idea of a self. Even Buddhists. The difference between a Buddhist and a non-Buddhist self-believer is a Buddhist would not advocate it as a doctrine. That would not be their ideology. But for a non-Buddhist or one who advocates, one who adheres to a doctrine of a self, they would keep it as the gospel, and they would always adhere to that, and they would even advocate or propagate this doctrine. Therefore, a Buddhist has according to our own teachings, Buddhists have a low level of degree of self-view, but they are not freed from the self-view in the emotional level, because whenever, for example, whenever we recall our lives, we would obviously say that I used to be this and this, and I used to do this and this, and I did this and this in my life, and it's me who has grown up till now, and it's me who will die one day, having lived a long life or whatever amount of years, and I will be the one who will be born again. So that kind of this is an emotion. In my terms, I would put it as the self-view in the emotional level, because it's, in order to get rid of that, one needs to reach at least the level of Nama-Rūpa Paricceda Jnana in a higher level. Not just seeing Nama and Rūpa as two separate entities, not just having the Nama-Rūpa Paricceda Jnana, but to reach the level of Nama-Rūpa Vavatthana, in which one establishes this correct view in himself. Now, so all of us, including ourselves, believe in a self, like a person who is doing all these activities, and so how do we relate this? How do we talk about this? How do we get rid of this view and understand deeper about this function? Another very important aspect is, why do we have this self-view? That's another important factor. For example, a nice simile given by one of my colleague, I would call a spiritual companion, is we normally don't get the do not get the intention of touching our tail. A monkey would have that intention to touch the tail, but a human would not have such desire or such intention. The reason is we don't possess tails. That's the obvious basic reason for that. And only when we have a tail, when someone has a tail, he or she would have that intention of touching it. Now, therefore, why do we get the self-view? That's a very important point. Why do we get such a view? Because there is something that ignites this thought, that is appealing to this thought. So it's not that we are just believing in a self out of nothing, or because it's just because of ignorance. No, there is something that leads to this idea, that manifests as a self. Otherwise, we would not be taking the longevity of the samsara, which doesn't have a beginning according to our doctrine. We have been holding this view throughout this entire journey. If there was no such a thing that manifests as a self or appeals to this ideology or thought, it is unlikely that we would hold into this throughout this longevity of samsara. So there is something that makes us to believe in this way. And what is it? Who is responsible for this? We are not talking about the self actually here. We are talking about the self of a doer, karaka ditti, not the entity of the self. In order to get rid of that entity, we have to talk about how to segregate the aggregates, and to understand that there is no one entity called a self other than the mass of realities that are connected to each other and are acting in cooperation. But now, regarding the self view, what is the main reason, or what is the main cause for us to believe in a person who does the acts, or a person, a self of a doer, is the is the integration, or we can call the cooperation between the mind and matter. Between mind and matter. Now we are talking about a doctrine which advocates a separate mind, a mind separated from the body, which has its own existence. But it cannot exist without the body unless it is being developed to a higher level in the Rūpa realm. Always it depends on the body. So it's quite different from the substantial dualism, in dualism in that sense. Anyway, so mind is a separate element and a body is a separate element, but they do depend upon each other. Now, when the intention is there to act in a certain way, the body behaves accordingly. That's the point here. If the body is behaving differently, then there's very less opportunity, I would say, for self-view to arise. One of the biggest reasons or appealing factors for self-view is this cooperation between the mind and body. There's a nice interaction between them. When our body gets struck by some physical tangible object, we feel it. That's another reason. Now we know there is a combination or connection between the mind and the body. Pain arises when the tissues are damaged, or when we hit against a rock, we start to feel ouch, and we do exhibit certain physical pain behaviors as well. But in order to have the self-view, one of the most interesting or fundamental factors is the body is behaving according to the mind. The body behaves as we intend. So what is this mechanism? This we have to analyze this mechanism in terms of Buddhist philosophy. Then we will be able to understand what is the relationship, and that's the point. That's the moment we are going to see what kind of a integral role or a pivotal role played by Chittaja Rūpas in this procedure. So then we can relate how Chittaja Rūpas are related to the self-view of a doer. So that would be our lesson today. So I'll go to the board and try to explain in detail. First we'll read the handout, the first few paragraphs, which would be the introduction to our lecture today. Chetana volition, Chittaja Rūpa, mind-born matter, and the Karaka Ditti view of a doer. Conventionally speaking, there is a living being who acts according to its will, or according to its will actually. I use it because being is not confined to a certain gender. According to Theravada, intended verbal and physical actions are done with the help of mind-born matter and intimations. Intimations are the viññatti. When a consciousness arises with the intention to perform a certain act, Chitta Kiriya Vayo Dhatu arises due to that volition. When the intention arises, Chitta Kiriya Vayo Dhatu happens. We have talked about this in detail in previous lectures. When consciousness arises with the intention to perform a certain act, Chitta Kiriya Vayo Dhatu arises due to that volition. That air element is steered towards the intended direction by the bodily intimation. Now air could have flown or worked at any direction, but it happens to work towards the intended direction. That is because of the intimation which influences this Vayu Dhatu, and intimation is an imprint of the consciousness, the Chetana. Chetana intends to move the body front, and the Chetana, the Vayu Dhatu pushes to the front, not to the back or not to the sides. Viññatti steers this Chitta Kiriya Vayu Dhatu towards the intended direction. So then the actions happen as we plan. Then while speaking, all the physical movements are regulated by Kaya Viññatti. Yes, while you are speaking, we do move our physical body, and that has to be done by Kaya Viññatti, obviously. Then while the sound is modified by Vaci Viññatti. And the sound is modified or regulated, rather than saying regulation is controlling the sound actually. So modifying the sound, like what kind of a sound, what kind of a word or a word is being uttered is defined by Vaci Viññatti. But we do see this in in robots and in, artificial intelligence is capable of producing sound as human beings, but that is an utterly Utuja Rūpa process according to Buddhism. In this lesson, we shall term both physical and verbal acts as bodily acts or physical acts for convenience. So, I am not going to differentiate verbal and physical acts because both are involved, done with the help of a body. So, we can term them all as physical acts. As actions happen according to one's intention, common folks tend to believe in a self or a belief or being who does that action. So, we self or a being who does that. Self and being are identical here. I don't distinguish them. So, when we do the activities, now for example, when I am speaking, I tend to believe that I am speaking. Or so someone who is listening would tend to believe that he is listening, he or she is listening. Writing a book or walking, we tend to believe that ourselves are walking and doing the activities. That's the common folks belief. And some may hold the intention to act as the self, while others may hold that the self has the intention of working. Now, it's a very important point. Now, imagine, now this is the person, he is walking. Some would believe that this is the entire thing is the person, including the body. Now, because it's very difficult to locate who am I, which part which part has the most I-ness, for example. And Descartes believed that it is the mind, because you cannot define yourself without thinking. Like his argument was, I could exist without a body, but I cannot exist without thinking. So he could not distinctly, clearly imagine himself without thinking. So he considered mind as a self, but normally in day-to-day life, ones who are against Descartes' view also suggest that how could the idea of I is a combination of both mind and matter. So when we believe in I, for example, when I go in front of a mirror and look into it, I see the body, and the perception that comes into my mind is this is I. I'm seeing myself. So normally in our thought pattern, I includes the body as well. I includes the body as well. Some may believe that there is a self doing the activity, or some believe that there is a chetana, intention, chetana. This chetana as the self, or some may believe that the entire thing as the self, entire thing as the self, and they sometimes may believe this self has the chetana. This self has the chetana. So in that regard, chetana is not the self. I am the self together with the body, and I get the intention of working. So normally you would say I had the intention of walking. That's why I intended to hit the person, but I couldn't hit him. For example, if the person has aimed and shot at a living being, and if he missed the shooting, and he would he would say, if someone asks, what was your intention? He would say, I intended to kill the person. So I intended to kill the person. Was the intention yourself? No. I was there and I had such an intention. So in that regard, self is one thing, intention is another thing, which is within the self, is a part of the self. And some would believe that it's the self itself is the chetana. Chetana itself is the self, other way around. So it's the chetana that acts as a self, or self has a chetana, so it acts accordingly. So, but when you analyze them, there will be huge difficulties to explain exactly what this is. But that's the normal common folks believe. Now, intention to act is as the self, or while others may consider the self has the intention of working. These considerations are called karaka ditti or satta ditti. Satta ditti, karaka ditti. Different terminologies. According to Theravada, actions are done according to the intention due to the arising of mind-born matter and intimation. Therefore, chitta rupas and vinyatis are a fundamental reason for the occurrence of karaka ditti. According to Theravada, what happens is, now while he is doing this action, or while he is walking, chitta rupas do arise throughout this body, and they are steered towards the intended direction by vinyati, for example, by vinyati. Maybe the directions may change. I don't know how it works while someone is walking. You have to think a bit. So anyway, it's directed towards a certain direction by the viññati. So with the now then the physical body, these are the Uttuja Rūpas, then they move. Now who is doing the activity? Chittaja Rūpas are pushing. And why do Chittaja Rūpas push according to the mind? Because they have the intimation viññati. And foremost is Chetana. The person had a Chetana intention to walk. Now in the Theravada perspective, when the Chetana arises to walk, Chittaja Rūpas arise and they are being directed or steered towards the direction of the Chetana by viññatis. This is what happens. So we have three main components in this act: Chetana, Chittaja Rūpas and the viññati. Because they are acting in cooperation, the action happens when the person intends to walk, he happens to walk. Now we are going to analyze them. Though it is expounded that there is no self which does the action, a question might arise as thus. Now this is a pressing question against Theravada doctrine or any Buddhist doctrine. A living being acts according to its will. As its soul is under its control, we have the entire control over the soul. Then one can ask, who am I and who is the self? Don't take it very seriously, because there is an authority upon the self. Self has its own authority. Like it acts according to as I want. The self has a self-governing feature. So the self has the authority and it can do whatever it likes. So that's the main idea here. Therefore, if actions happen according to the intention, is it not that the doctrine of non-selfness is wrong? So this is one of the biggest arguments the ones who are believing self brings forth. We do actions as we want, and in most of the cases we may do it without mistaking. Like our body would behave as we intend. And this is a good indication to advocate the self, because it's very unlikely, unless the person has a specific sickness that we recognize, the person would be able to act. The physical activities would always correspond with the intention of the person. What the body acts as we intend. That's very simple. So isn't it because of a self? Because self thinks, and self has an authority or a dominance over the body, and it governs the body, so the body behaves according to the self. And some believe that self is apart from all the five aggregates, and the body is non-self, and the self is there, and even the five aggregates all the five aggregates are out of the self, and the self is something else, and it is using this like a driver who is driving a vehicle. It is using these aggregates, the five senses, and also the body as a person who is in chariot and living this life. So anyway, so this would be the pressing question against Theravada teachings. How could Theravadins answer this tough question? For this, we need to go into deep analysis on Chetana, which produces Chittaja Rūpas and viññati. Can Chetana perform physical acts? That's the interesting topic. Can Chetana alone do this physical act? It seems not. Because we see people who are paralyzed, who are having disabilities, having the Chetana, intention of doing something, but they are unable to do so because of their physical defects. Their body is missing some necessary features. According to Buddhism, that is a defect found in Uttuja Rūpas. One way or another, they are unable to do that. So intention alone is not sufficient or adequate to perform this activity. Intention alone cannot do that. It needs the support of other factors. That's very obvious in a person who is paralyzed. He has the intention, he or she has the intention, but unable to perform the activities as expected. Do actions, when an intention to act arises, actions take place according to the intention. It is obvious to everyone. We shall analyze this phenomenon. And also it's very obvious when we are acting. Now, when I want to speak some word, I will be uttering specifically that word. Otherwise, the entire world would be in a chaos. Because if we are uttering words that we don't intend, And if you are doing actions that we do not intend, then it's going to be, no one can predict anything. And no one can have a relationship with anyone, because it's a chaos actually. So it's very obvious, actions do happen as we intend according to the Chetana. Do actions take place just because an intention to act occurs? Can intention alone perform the act? When the person is paralyzed, though the intention to act arises, it is not possible to act as one intends due to weakness in the Rutuja Rupas or the physical body. That too is evident to everyone. That's also very evident. Therefore, it is clear that volition alone cannot perform actions. So that's the first point here. Then, according to Theravada even, the Chetana cannot perform action. That was an objective, very practical observation. Now, in Theravada, what happens is Chetana cannot alone move the body. It doesn't have that capacity. But it produces Chittaja Rupas in the body. And those Chittaja Rupas are steered or directed or modified according to the Chetana. And they cause this physical force to move, for the body to move. That's what is happening. So three things are involved: Chetana, Chittaja Rupas, and Vinyati, which are part of the Chittaja Rupas. Vinyati. With these three, we are acting. Even according to Theravada, Chetana alone cannot perform actions. As the doctrine explains, when a volition to act occurs, together with it arises Chitta Kiriya Vayo Dhatu. Chittaja Rupa, the Chitta Kiriya Vayo Dhatus. That Vayo Dhatu is modified to behave according to the intention of the Kaya Vinyati. Physical actions take place with the correlation of these elements. Hence, Chetana cannot perform actions by itself. Then, according to Theravada, Doctrine of Theravada, I shall read it because we have already done these things. According to Theravada, Doctrine of Theravada, Theravadins, the Chetana has the mere intention of executing the action. It does not have the intention of, the next point is, it does not have the intention of producing the air element or the bodily intimation. Very important factor here is, now Chetana intends to move. The Chetana's intention is to move forward. But it doesn't have an intention of producing Chittaja Rupas. But these Chittaja Rupas are happening due to Chetana. That's the point here. Very important point. Now, Chetana arises intending to walk to the front. When Chetana arises, together with the Chetana, Chittaja Rupas arise. And these Chittaja Rupas are steered to the direction or modified as in order to behave, like in order to in a way that it could move the entire body. Now this arrow is Vinyati, Kaya Vinyati, and the yellow color things are Chittaja Rupa, Chitta Kiriya Vayo Dhatu. Now Chetana has the intention of walking, and walking does happen, but Chetana doesn't have an intention of producing this Chittaja Rupa. That's a very important point here. It doesn't intend to produce Chittaja Rupas. When Chetana intends to go front, Chittaja Rupas happen moving the body front. There's some kind of a synchrony between these two. Some kind of a synchrony. Synchrony was introduced into the philosophy of mind and body by one of the philosophers who talked about there was two philosophical views called occasionalism and interactionism. If my memory was correct, occasionalism was talking that mind and the body are synchronized from the very beginning, and while the body is happening, body is working in a certain way, mind too behaves like that, but there is no causal link from mind to body or body to mind. So they are not interacting, but they are synchronized, like they are behaving, they have their own pathways. But in this regard, now Chetana is intending to, That was occasionally is a different doctrine, is a different philosophical view actually. Now Chetana is moving forward, it intends to go forward. Now Chittarupas are happening and they are also moving forward. So you can see that synchrony between these two. But Chetana doesn't have the intention, that's the important point here, of producing them. It doesn't produce, like it doesn't intend to produce. That's the point here. It doesn't intend to produce. But Chittarupas arise due to Chetana. Chittarupas arise due to Chetana. So I have to say Chittarupas do arise due to Chetana. Right? But it doesn't intend to produce them. No such intention. No such intention of producing. It intends to go forward. Intends to go forward. But Chittarupas are happening due to Chetana. It's a very important point. It only intends to walk. It doesn't intend to produce Chittarupas. But Chittarupas are arising due to it and behaving accordingly. So it's very important to understand this distinction. I'll repeat again. Chetana intends to walk. It happens with the help of Chittarupas, which are moving according to the Chetana, modified by Viññati. Chetana doesn't have the intention of producing Chittarupas, but they arise due to Chetana and behave according to Chetana. Therefore, it's not that Chetana is, in that sense, Chetana is the fundamental. Now, if we ask what is the fundamental cause of walking, intention to walk. Intention to walk. What is the fundamental cause of preaching? Intention to preach. But it's not that Chetana is completely governing this entire activity and arranging every physical component or mental or physical component according to its will. Chetana is the mere intention of walking or doing a certain activity. And the other things follow it, happens accordingly. Now fire doesn't have the intention of heating something, but when fire arises, the thing which is in contact would get heated. In the same way, when Chetana arises, Chetana intends to walk, intention is there unlike fire, but it doesn't intend to produce Chittarupas. Chittarupas happen accordingly and work according to the Chetana under its influence. Now that's what is being said here. According to the doctrine of Theravadins, the Chetana has the mere intention of executing the action. It does not have an intention of producing the air element or the bodily intimation. Therefore, production of Chittakiriya Vayu Dhatu and the Kaya Viññati are not deliberate acts of the Chetana. Walking is a deliberate act, we have to acknowledge that. Otherwise there would be no karma actually. Walking is a deliberate act. But production of Chittarupas and Viññati is not a deliberate act of Chetana. It's very important to know this subtle difference. When Chetana and other relevant factors are present, the air element and the bodily intimation arise and actions take place. Therefore, in reality, it is not that Chetana does the act, but the actions take place due to Chetana and other relevant elements. Now we analyze, one can easily argue it's Chetana what is doing the activity, who is doing the activity, which is doing the activity. Yes, you can argue like that because it is the most, if even there were Chittarupas and intimations were there, or intimation doesn't happen normally, even though they were present, like, better not to say intimation, even Chittarupa is present, the actions will not take place if there is no Chetana to move forward. Unless someone has given you a force, outside force, external force, or pushed you forward. Therefore, Chetana is the foremost reason. So one can argue that actions are done by Chetana. But when we analyze, it seems Chetana is also not performing the actions in this entire, the actions in the entirety are not performed by the Chetana. Chetana is one of the foremost factors only. It is not the one who does the action completely. It is unable to perform the action. The actions would never take place if the relevant components are missing. Who are they? Chitta, Kriya, Vaya Dhatu and Kaya Viññati. And the Chetana doesn't even have an intention of producing them. That's the next point here. If a Chetana produced them and did the action by itself, then we can say yes, it has more doer's nature is there. But here, Chetana intends, it is the foremost factor, it is the karma actually, but it cannot do the act by itself. It needs the support of Chitta, Kriya, Vaya Dhatu and Kaya Viññati. Moreover, an action do not take place when Uttaja Rupas are not under suitable conditions. Now, it's not only Kaya Viññati and Chitta Rupas are involved here. There has to be the structure. How about the other Rupas? The physical body itself needs to be in good condition. Otherwise, if the leg is broken or the muscles are weakened, so the actions do not take place. So Uttaja Rupas also should be in good condition. So they are like, if even the driver accelerates, if the engine is broken, the car would not move. Therefore, these are the things that are related to the mind. These are the mind itself, the consciousness, Chetana, mentality, I would say, mentalities. Then they are related to this consciousness. They are in this part, like they are much more closer to the consciousness, much more closer. And this is the physical part, actual physical. They are also physical. Chitta Rupas are physical, but they are produced by the consciousness. So they are in the side of the they are aligned with the consciousness actually, though they are physical. But Uttaja Rupas are the real physical stuff. And they should be in a good condition for this action to take place. And so we have another condition. The Uttaja Rupas must be in a good condition. So then who makes this bridge between the consciousness and the real matter is the Chitta Rupas. They are also matter. I am not saying that they are not matter, but they are more into the side of consciousness. They have been produced by the consciousness. So they are a type of, it seems like they are a subtle type of matter. Then, moreover, as actions do not take place when Uttaja Rupas are not under suitable conditions, adequate conditions, it is clear that Chetana alone cannot perform the actions. Therefore, Chetana does not perform actions, but actions take place when Chetana and other related conditions are present. That's how Theravadians would put this forward. Athapi yataha pana loke karaka bhavepi patavi apo tejo teja utu adayo paticca ankuradhinam abhinibbatti disati. The trees do sprouts. They do sprout or they propagate sprouts even without a doer. That is just due to the combination of four great elements and the weather conditions. Tatha, in the same way, ete sampi kusaladinam dhammanam hetupacce samagya abhinibbatti hoti iti veditava. In the same way, when the causes, relevant causes are there, these kusala dhammas do arise. So there is no one who is doing it. When the causes are present, realities happen. In the same way, when the causes are present, actions do take place. It's not that someone is doing. That's the takeaway message here. It's not that Chetana is doing that. When Chetana is present, actions do take place. Therefore, that's why I'll read the sentence again. Therefore, Chetana does not perform actions, but actions take place when Chetana and other related conditions are present. That's the highlighting point here. Then, what happens is, now the question, now we can keep on. Now, this will lead to another question. Now, how is there no control over actions and so forth? I'm not going into that deep discussion here. I'm going to talk now. A question can be asked. Still one can ask, there is a soul. Soul is there, for example, Chetana. Soul is not capable of doing the actions, all the actions by itself. It does the actions when the relevant factors are there. One can bring this argument. For example, soul is, I am there. I would, obviously the ones who advocate soul would know that, would advocate that the body would die and when there is no food, and the soul would migrate to another place. So even there is a soul needs other supporting of other factors to exist. We have to acknowledge that, because otherwise, if the soul alone can exist, the life exist, and the life would be there, would exist or prevail even without the relevant conditions. So in the same way, one can argue the self is here, and self does the actions with the help of other relevant elements. So one can still adhere to the self even under this explanation. The next counter question would be, it is clear that Chetana alone cannot perform actions. That's clear. However, is that sufficient to establish the doctrine of non-selfness? Is it not possible that self perform the actions when other relevant factors are present? Self is existing, or self is living the life only when food is given, the weather conditions are conducive. Can't this same theory applicable to, isn't that same theory is applicable to the actions? Chetana is there, Chetana is doing the actions. Yes, it's clear it cannot do it by, Chetana alone cannot do all the actions. It needs the relevant support of the relevant element, the particular elements. So when they are supported, the support is given, still Chetana is doing the action. So still one can maintain this view of doer even under this Theravada explanation. Everyone is aware that beings get the intention to act. Ordinary people believe that it is the self that has this intention. They refer to this self as a living being or soul or me, whatever. It is interesting to investigate whether this intention to act and the assumed self are two things or the same. That's another point here. Now, we think if this is the self, now self has the intention. So we cannot exclude this Chetana from the self. That's a very important point. Even though one advocates self is doing the action with the support of other relevant elements or realities, the integral part of the self is Chetana. Chetana is the real force of doing these activities. Even the self must have Chetana. It's the self which thinks or intends. So we cannot analyze it further in this doctrine of self. Self has the intention. So we cannot take out the Chetana or the intention out of the equation. It has to be there. So we would say the soul, the person with the normal folks would say, the ones who are holding the doctrine would say, or holding the self view would say, Chetana has the intention, so it acts accordingly. Actions do place according to the intention of the Chetana. So Chetana, so we have to be very careful on that. Whatever way the self has been interpreted, in this regard, in this case, Chetana must be there with the self, or either it has to be the self. Chetana has to be the self, or it should be with the self. Now, when analyzing, one must not forget the fact that intention for each act. Now, the point here is, now Chetana, the self, now we took this as a Chetana. Now, this is the argument. We don't need to go into a non-self doctrine, because Chetana is here, for example, the self is here, either including all or at least the Chetana only. This is the self. Self acts with the help of other elements. Or either the Chetana only is the self, or this entire thing of the self, or the entire thing. Entire body and the life would be the self. So when the supporting factors are there within the self, or some other factors, it does the action. So in most of the cases, they would focus only at the Chetana or something related to Chetana as the self. Now, a very interesting point is something that we can observe with direct experience is that Chetana, whenever we are doing action, Chetana rises and falls, vanishes. We cannot deny this fact. This is a subjective experience that we get. When I intend to walk, I have the intention or volition for every step. The intention with which I lift and put forward or brings forward my left leg is different from the intention of moving the right leg. All the time when we are doing the actions, intentions are renewed. Past intentions, now one can argue he has a common intention of walking and the actions take place as long as that intention is there. But when we analyze, it's very clear. For each and every minute step, there is intentions are arising at each step, at each activity. Therefore, Chetana or the volition that executed the particular act vanishes together with it, and a new Chetana arises with it. We cannot deny this fact when we are analyzing deeply. Even in neuroscience, when we are doing a particular activity for a long period, the firings do happen again and again continuously. It's not that with the one brain firing all the activities were done. No, that's not how it happens. You need the brain firings, fiber firings again and again in order for this continuation of the activity. So if you are walking, Chetana is involved in each and every step. That's very important. And the previous Chetanas do vanish while new Chetanas are rising. And then they would also vanish and new Chetanas will take place. So this is a very directly experienceable thing that can be experienced. Right. So when analyzing, one must not forget the fact that intention for each act vanishes together with that act itself. This is evident to all of us. The intention of raising the hand up is not present when putting down the hand. Therefore, it must be kept in mind that every volition disappears as soon as that action is done. That is the main argument from the Theravada point of view. Now we'll see how we can bring this. If the Chetana and the self are same, now the two questions. Now we can now advocate either as Chetana equals to self. Chetana equals to self. According to Libson's argument, I think Libson's or Lisbon, whoever, law, whatever the features are there in Chetana must be present in the self. That's the point. If Chetana is the self, Chetana, all the features that are present must be in self, and all the features present in self must be found in Chetana. If Chetana is the self. Now, what happens is, it's very obvious to us, Chetana rises and vanishes. So according to this law, it must be, if this equation is correct, the self must also rise and fall. Self must also, because we can directly see that Chetana is rising and falling. So in that regard, if Chetana is the self, it should also rise and fall. And this is counterintuitive. Because we believe in a person. Now imagine this activity now, if now walking from here to here, if we had taken 10 steps, if we will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps for example. Now for each step there should be a new volition. According to Abhidhamma, there should be more volitions than one for each step, but we'll just take it as one volition for one step. Now, volition arises and vanishes with that step, and a new volition arises and vanishes with that step, with the second step, the next step. The same way this keeps on going. As much as the work we do, volitions keep on arising and passing away. renewing, new variations are happening. If Chetana is the self, what happens is, this amounts, the Chetana's rising and falling, amounts to the rising and falling of a self. It means even in keeping 8 steps, self has vanished and arisen again 8 times. So is it the new self that is arising? When the previous self vanished, what happened to that self? What is occurring as new? Is it a new self or is it the same self? If it is the same self, what did vanish previously? Because one of the many main features of self-view is being a single entity throughout the time. In the dimension of time, this remains as a single entity. There has no been 2 capital I's in our life. I is always singular. The same I who was a child, grew up, came into young age, became old, decayed, and finally dies. That is the intuition that we have. That is our common belief. If I am rising and falling occasionally at each and every action done, then it means there is no personality or identity remaining. That is the biggest challenge for self-view. The doctrine of self maintains the identity. It's the same person who has been existing throughout this time. And some believe that it would go to another life. Migrate to another life. Within the life. Transmigration. When Chetana is equated with the self, as the rising and vanishing of Chetana is evident to all of us, which is a first-hand experience through the subjective analysis, which we call introspection, it leads to the argument or the formulation of a theory or the notion that self is rising and falling throughout this entire life, not only on few occasions, at each and every activity. And this is counterintuitive, and this is a strong argument against self-view. Therefore, if Chetana is the self, we understand, yes, we acknowledged all the arguments, yes, Chetana could be the self, and Chetana must be acting with the help of other relevant elements. We didn't deny that. But when you now what is the self? Is the Chetana the self? If someone says yes, at the end of each and every activity, that self must be vanishing, and new selves are arising at every new activity done. So this is a huge problem. If Chetana and the self are same, when the volition vanishes, the self must also vanish together with it. There is no dichotomy between the two. There is no dichotomy. There is nothing called the self as a Chetana. Chetana is associated with the self. No, because if we identify them in terms of identity, like they are the same, which we call a rigid identity, because Chetana has some features through which we can understand them, recognize it, and self has its own rigid features. And in philosophy we say this should be same in any given world. So anyway, so Chetana rises and falls means self also rises and falls, because they are the same. Identity theory. But the public would not accept this notion. It is obvious that the intention to act disappears together as soon as the act is done. But the person who performed the action outlives the action. Now, the common folks belief is that, yes, Chetana vanishes. Right? Chetana vanishes. Intention to act disappears. It is obvious that the intention to act disappears. We have to remove the together. Disappears together. Together is not necessary. As soon as the act is done. But the person who performed the act outlives the action. It's not that I have finished this one step that I am dying. No. I will retain the whole activity. The person would retain throughout the whole activity, and actions will be done. That is the intuition that we have, that is the belief that we have. That's why I say I did this action. Now, I worked for 5 hours to accomplish this task. So it means I have outlived the action. I am still living even I have finished the action. The self retains. Self is prevailing. Though the actions have vanished, though the volitions have vanished. That is the common belief. But if Chetana is identified as the self, or self as the Chetana, whatever way it is, then Chetana, self must vanish at the end of every action, which is very counterintuitive. The self stays after the volition has vanished. Therefore, considering volition and self to be identical seems not a practical approach. Then if we take Chetana and self as two different entities, it is possible for the self to live even after the volition has vanished. How could this idea be analyzed further? Now, we equated like identified Chetana as the self. Now, the way out would be not to identify Chetana as the self, and Chetana and self are not the same. In that case, even Chetana rises and falls, self can still sustain. It doesn't need to go under the same destiny that Chetana went through. It could sustain, or it could prevail actually. It could remain as it is. So, if Chetana and self are two distinct things, what would be the approach? As Theravadians, this information you can find in Abhidhammavatara, the book called Abhidhammavatara, which is a very renowned book in Theravada tradition, which is very rarely used these days actually. In this book we find an argument against this. Chetana is not the self, but there is a self. So how would we explain that? The first would be Chetana and self are two different entities but are existing at the same place, existing together, inseparably together. The example would be the Rūpa Kalapa. In a Rūpa Kalapa, 4 great elements have their own unique intrinsic natures, but they are inseparable, practically inseparable. Intellectually, we can recognize or know them as different elements, but in practicality, you cannot separate 4 elements from each other. Even the derived elements cannot be separated from the great elements. So they appear or exist in a cluster, an inseparable cluster. So can't Chetana and self, because the point we should not forget is, the Chetana, the self should not be lacking Chetana. If self is without Chetana, this is going to lead to a big problem, because as we believe, as we feel, we have to always respect how it is felt. That is only when that's how it is practical. That's the biggest challenge even physicalism has. Because physical entities do not have the properties of mentality. Qualia, propositional content, propositional attitudes, they are not found in the physical elements, and mental elements lack physical elements. Like the extension, changeability, all these are lacking. The tangibility are not there in the mental elements. So when you are talking about mental elements, we have to talk about the qualia, how it is felt. How about the object, the propositional attitude, professional content has to be talked. So we cannot talk about mentalities without those aspects. In the same way, if we are talking about a self who does the action, we cannot talk about self without Chetana. Intention is a must. Even the self has the intention of doing the activity. So we should not forget that the element of intention, volition, must be present with the self in one way or another. So the argument would be Chetana and self. Chetana and self are two different entities, but they exist inseparably in a certain unit. So we can still say self is not 100% identical. It's not numerically identical. That's the word we use. Numerically identical. But they are related. Self has Chetana as one of its parts, though it's not numerically identical with Chetana. So the Chetana, and it's not that they are very far away. It's not that Chetana is, self is without any Chetana. Chetana is with the, self is with the Chetana, but it's not the same. So in this doctrine, what they would advocate is self has Chetana and we act accordingly. The self is capable and actions do happen according to the self. But this, according to Theravadians, still leads to another issue. Because they are inseparable. That's the point here. Inseparably related, connected. When things are inseparably connected, like in a Rūpa Kalapa, what does it mean? Inseparable means one cannot exist without the other. Okay, we can still say it's not that Chetana is supporting self. Self is the most fundamental part. Chetana is depending on that. Still, like one Rūpa, the Upadaya Rūpa, derived matter depending on the four great elements in a Kalapa, because derived matters are not supporting the four great elements. Yes, we understand that. So self can be taken as the most fundamental part, and Chetana is depending on that. But still, as they are inseparable, as the definition goes on, when one of them vanishes, the other cannot exist. Practically, it doesn't go into exist. Even though self is not depending on Chetana, that Chetana is only Chetana is depending on self, still, if they are inseparable, it means the entire cluster comes into appearance and goes into vanishing or disappearance together. So the thing is, Chetana's rising and falling is evident to us. We cannot deny that. It's a first-hand experience that we have. So now, if Chetana rises and vanishes, the self which is connected to it also undergo the same destiny. That is, it will also should rise and fall. The same problem occurs. When Chetana and self were identical, when Chetana rises and falls, self has to rise and fall. When Chetana and self are connected inseparably, the same thing, the same problem happens. When Chetana rises and falls, the self would also go into vanishing. The next approach would be unidentical approach, non-identical approach. Chetana and self are two different entities, and they exist separately. Maybe they are physically connected to, like related to each other, like Chakku Viññāna is depending on Chakku Pasada, but still they are two different entities. They are not mixed. They are not the same unit. Chetana and self are like two kalapas in two different locations, or mentality and materiality which are associating, like a mentality which associate the materiality, but still Chetana and self, like Chakkuprasada and Viññas consciousness are two different entities. Chetana and self are two different entities. They are separated entities. So, self can outlive Chetana. Even Chetana rises and vanishes, it is not necessary for the self to rise and vanish. It seems like this can retain the self-view, doctrine of self-view. There is no harm. Yes, Chetana, because it's a first-hand experience, Chetana is rising and falling. Let it be, it doesn't matter. Self can still prevail. So it can still retain. So what's the issue now? The problem is, we should not be forgetting this first argument. If self is doing the activity, yes, it may do the activity, but we should not forget that self has a volition, it has an intention of doing it. Otherwise, the entire discussion about this action, self-acting would make no sense. Even if there is a self, that self should have the intention to do that. If intention is something other than self or not related to self, self is doing nothing. Some other force is acting, then self is not responsible for this activity. Therefore, if you bring this argument here, if Chetana and self are two different entities, not in the common place or acting as a one unit, self become intentionless. It doesn't have an intention. Then the action is not done by self, it's done by something else. Therefore, if we take self and Chetana are two different entities, yes, Chetana can outlive this, self can outlive Chetana, and it can retain, even the action was done, but still, then the problem is the action was not done by self. It's done by a Chetana, which is apart from the self. And these also counterintuitive. Therefore, according to that approach, still self-view seems to be not very practical. So Theravadians believe, no, Chetana cannot be the self. And there are two explanations on that. I'll take this for the next week and we'll go into a very interesting topic. And I'm going to deepen this topic further. So as the time is up, I'm bound to finish this. So till now, I hope you got the idea. And I'll repeat these highlighted points next week and go for another interesting topic, because I didn't read out how the Pali has been explained. The book has explained Eka Desa Lakkana Katanyatha Desantara Katanyatha. So I shall explain them in next week and go into another interesting topic of how the decisions are being made and what is the relationship between Chetana. It will go a bit away from the Chitta Rupa's topic, but I'll take that into discussion. So today's discussion was what is the self view of a doer, and how Chetana, Chitta Rupas, Vinyatyas involved in production of this product, means causing this Karaka view, the view of a doer, and then what is the Theravadian approach, and what is the role played by Chetana, and the relationship between Chetana and the Chitta Rupas, and where is the intention directed at, and then finally how do the Theravadians defend their self doctrine of non-selfness. Yes, so I'll conclude the lecture, opening the forum for a discussion. Yes.
Your explanation was very clear. So it is only a confirmation that the self is not required for the continuation of existence. That's how I took it. That's the understanding. It confirmed what I already knew, that all the both bodily actions and even the verbal actions does not require the intervention or the control or some way of involvement of a self. So that's fine. My question is not really on that direction, but that's about really analyzing the process a little more with Abhidhammic facts. I would really like to know now when there is either a bodily action or a verbal action, isn't there a sort of two independent processes not happening parallelly but happening on a serial basis, just like the mind works all the time? So one is based on the Manodvara. So volition comes in first into the Manodvara of even moving the body or making a statement. So that is as long as that those mind streets are restricted only to Manodvara, neither the bodily action nor the verbal action will take place. But there is a transition at some stage that the Manodvaric process gets transferred onto the bodily, that is something based on Kaya Dvara, and there the process is then it's a feedback process of the body comparing its the position, current position, relation to external environment, and deciding what movement it should make. So probably there again it would be both Manodwara and Kayadwara working with one another. Because feedback may have to go to the Manodwara, and the Manodwaric process has to take place as to how it should be directed. Then it comes back to the Kayadwara, and the Kaya Vinyati takes place. So in relation to today's discussion, what I want to know is that as long as the process is happening only within Manodwara, whatever the Chittaja Rupas produce are not capable of moving the body itself. In other words, even if there is Kaya Vinyati, there may not be the Chittakiriya Vayu Dhatu being produced at that stage. But when it comes to the Kayatvarika mind streams, those javanas will produce both. So then that will cause the movement. And then the third aspect you talked about, the physical ability of the body itself to move, will really limit the extent to which those Chittakiriya Vayu based Rūpa to be produced. So sometimes, and actually the same explanation can be used even for dreams, because the dream we see we are moving the body, but actually the body doesn't move physically. So there again, it's only a Manodwaric process. It doesn't produce Chittakiriya Vayu Dhatu, even if there could be Vinyati, and therefore body doesn't move. If the body moves at that stage, you get awakened. I mean, this is what I remember from and it's in line with what you explained a few months back, maybe a few classes, but the time-wise it's a few months back. So if I look at it that way, both the same explanation can be used for even Kayadwaric or Vajidwaric processes, because they are the physical action or the sound that comes out in the form of words or whatever, take place in a sort of a serially processed streets of mind processes and either bodily processes in the case of Kayadwara, probably when it comes down, both Kayadwara and Vachi. So there may be, as you explained, the Kaya Vinyati also takes place there. So if we look at it that way, this is actually going deep into the subject from that Abhidhammic point of view. I see then actually we could explain the process much better in a Theravadic point of view. If I say that, am I right? That's my question.
Kaya Dwarika Chitta doesn't produce any vinyati, or it cannot move the body. Kaya Dwarika is you cannot make any movements with the Kaya Dwarika Vitis, because Panchadwarika Vitis are according to the Vibhanga and its commentary, are not capable of making any bodily or verbal movements. Kaya Dwarika Vitis are just it just senses where what the about the tangible object. It's not responsible in process. It's only pure Manodwara is involved in verbal and physical activities. There's no Panchadwara involvement here, because Panchadwara Vitis are incapable of making, according to it's a very basic fundamental, is incapable of causing the physical activities to happen. It's only purely mind-o is happening. Only in dreams as a different case, because the entire energy of the mind and the body has declined, so there is no physical movement happening. It's not because only Manodwara is involved. Even where I'm making, like while I'm being awake, I'm making my bodily movements, only Manodwara is involved. But there is another very interesting topic about how our mind is feeling about our limbs. For example, where to move. Normally I have a sense about my entire body. According to medical science, this is not felt by the neurons that feel the touch. This is a different sensor in our mind. This was also explained in one of our Sinhalese classes when Dr. Anjani Gammage explained about this, because it's a different neuro pathway going on, like how we feel where my limbs are. For example, I know my hand is here, my other hand is here. So this is not, according to them, it's not taken from the kaya, the neurons that feel the touch. So it's a matter of fact whether in Theravada perspective, do we feel it through the body door or do we through the body door? Means the kaya vinyana dwara. So normally one can argue whether it's through kaya vinyana dwara or whether it's through mind door that is happening. That is like we know where our limbs are, where our body is there, body is located. And but for the involvement of physical and verbal activities, 5 sense door processes have no involvement at all. It is only mind door that is acting. And when it comes to dreaming, nirutsaha sabhava is there of the body is weakened and it has gone into a very different stage, like weakened or like non-active stage, inactive stage. So even though the mind is also having unreal object, so that is the reason why one cannot perform activities in dreams. But that is not to say all the time, because according to our Theravada Vinaya, when emission of semen happens, yes, people do make physical movements in dream. When it happens in dream, there is no offense when semen is emitted in dreams, but physical activities do take place, and Buddha has made it a non-offense for the monks because it is beyond our control. So and sometimes people do sleepwalking as well. So Theravadians, according to Milinda Panya, yes, as Rerukane Chandivela Mahathera has said, physical actions do not take place while dreaming. But it is mentioned in Vimati Vinodini sub-commentary very clearly that actions do take place while we are dreaming, and that's why the non-offense was given for Sukha Visatti Sikkapada as a Sangha in the Sangha by the Buddha. So so I would say when we say Kaya Dwara and Vachi Dwara, they are not mind processes actually. Kaya Dwara and Vachi Dwara are the Kaya Vinyati and the Vachi Vinyati. When we say Kaya Dwara in the mind processes, that is the Kaya Vinyana process, like Sampatichana Santirana, Kaya Vinyana Chittas do arise. So that is a different thing. It's where the consciousness arises. It is the Kaya Pasada that is the base for the consciousness to happen. And but Kaya Dwara and Vachi Dwara are the Vinyatis. They are not involved with any consciousness. So when we say while we are acting, only mind door is involved, not the body door. But obviously we feel through body door. We feel through eye door even. What I mean is the eye consciousnesses happen, eye consciousness processes, body consciousness processes do take place, but they have no involvement in the production of the action.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will. Actually, I missed that point that because you have to separate the input to and the output to. Because when you say Kaya Vinyati, it's only the output. That Pottabha and the Kaya Vinyana is only input to. So both are really required. Even if you take the example of a robo arm or even any machine component which moves. As an engineer, I am more familiar with the machine components which moves. We need to be sensing where whichever the point of that cylinder or point of that wheel is to decide the further action. And there's a feedback control system which always feeds the current position and then sends it back to a control unit. The control unit compares with the target that has been set. And then if there is a positive difference, it decides to move in that direction. So that's what happens when you look at it from a science or engineering point of view.
No, that the problem is we understand that But the problem is that sense is through kaya dwara or mind dwara? Because if that is through kaya dwara, what happens is Brahmas would not be able to act. That's the point here. Brahmas do not have kaya viññāna. Brahmas do not have kaya pasada. So if they don't have that sensory thing, how could they move? How could they walk? How could they sit? So that's why the discussion came. According to neuroscience, we have sensory neurons through which we feed the tangible objects. But this, what you are saying, where the limbs are, how they are located, this sense is through a different process. They don't say that's the same process involved in feeling the touch. Because this discussion came in the Sinhalese class actually when we are talking about this. How could Brahma walk if they cannot feel these senses? How could they, especially if they are sitting on a chair, for example? It is doctrine says they have mansions, they have beds. So if they are sitting on a chair, how could they feel? How could they do that activity if there is no bodily feeling going on? So that's why the discussion came, and Professor Anjani Gamage that they explained that according to neuroscience, the idea of keeping the limbs, idea of location of limbs is through a different sensory process. So that's why the question is still there. Is that sensory thing that we feel is through body do or is only through mind do? If it is only through body do, the Brahmas would have a difficult time in doing the actions.
Okay. If one little question, I will stop asking anymore. That is because you mentioned about the Brahma has two other doors. They have the eye.
That's not relevant. That's not relevant. That's why the point is you have to feel that.
But not in the same way as the Rūpa Loka sattvas. But the Brahmas may eye or the hearing ability may be able to giving them a sense of distance, sense of position.
No, if I ask, can a Brahma walk having closed the eyes and having closed the ears?
They should be able to, because when they travel from the Brahma Loka to the earth to appear before Lord Buddha, I don't think it was a process where physically they track the path.
No, it's not about traveling through the sky. It's not about traveling. They walk in their world. They walk in their mansions. It's not that they are always traveling in the sky, right? So when they walk, for example, when they walk.
I cannot answer that question. I have not studied that to that extent. So I will have to take whatever you say on that. I didn't think of that side because I assumed that Rūpa Loka Brahma also has certain superhuman abilities which enables them to even superhuman abilities such as Aviññā and able to perform irati. Then I don't think the Kaya Viññati and this Chittakiri Vayoga to consider because probably it's through a totally different process. So that's the process probably used by Brahma. I may be wrong. Please correct me.
No, there's no such explanation. It's the same process.
I didn't want to go there. I was looking at the Rūpa Loka. So when you look at Rūpa Loka, how I figured it out was it's a sort of we call it serial processing in computer science. Sensing is done by the normal Pottabha and
no, according to neuroscience, sensing is not done by normal Pottabha. That's why I'm saying. It's a different process going on. It's a different, according to neuroscience, no, it's a different pathway. The sensing of the limbs is you do touch, yeah, then this is a Pottabha process, but I know where my limbs are, I know where my hand is, I know where my legs are. This is not the, according to neuroscience, it's not the Pottabha thing.
Yeah, but I don't know about neuroscience, so I didn't take the neuroscience point of view, but I simply looked at walking. Now,
so that
you're and then you know you have sufficiently moved it upwards, and then you move forward, and there again you sense the distance, and then you decide to drop it. And when the left foot is in touch with the ground, then only the right foot goes up. So in that, this sensing and taking action based on sensing is very clear.
Now you better study about this, because it's very clearly mentioned. The sensing of the limbs is not through, it's a different process. Because we know that we had this discussion on.
It may be a different process, but assisted by the contact.
No, it's a different pathway. It's a different neurosystem is going on.
Yeah, it can be. That's no issue. That's a medical complication and a medical detail, which I don't want to go into. But if you look at it as a mind process.
So that's why I'm saying, if you bring this argument here, the Brahmas will have a difficult time in walking, because they have the same process. They have Chittakiriya Vayodhatu involved, they have Vinyatis involved. It's not a different process. Just having Abhiññāna doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want with the mind. So because they are also a Rūpa Loka, there's matter is there. So they do walk, they do sit, they do talk. Viññati is involved. How can they talk without Viññati? How can they talk without the movement of the body? So if it is only sense to the body though, I'm not denying that. If someone argues, if someone is, that's why I said whether that limbs positions are felt through the body though or mind though is a discussion in Theravada. It is open to discussion. But if someone says it's felt through the body though only, then the Brahmas will have a difficult time in walking, because eye and ear cannot solve the issues here. Because eye and ear are solved, because they are not always looking at their limbs while they are doing, and they are not hearing these sounds and figuring out where their limbs are. So they do have a feel about their limbs, and there's no other different process explained in Theravada Buddhism. It has to be Chittakiriya Vayodhatu, it has to be Viññati and Kaya Viññati and Vaci Viññati, because they do Vipassana as we do, and the non-self doctrine is valid to them as well. So if we bring Kaya Prasada into the context and Kaya Dwara Vitis into the context, what happens is, this is the same question I raised in the class. If that's what we believe, that Kaya Dwara is involved, as you said, in bodily activities. That's why at that time, that's why the neurologist said, no, it's a different process. Don't take it as that, because so then it opened the gate. Like yes, then Brahmas they may have a different process going on. So if Kaya Viññati, Kaya Dwara is involved, because this question was asked many years ago from me by one of my colleagues, like monks, friend monks, that if they don't feel they have the Kaya Prasada, how could they move? The obvious question, as you say, how could they move? How could they have the idea of walking, and can they walk on their realm? If there's no Kaya Prasada, or if they don't have any senses, but they do walk. They are not just walking on the sky. They are not traveling on the sky only. They have mansions, they do sit on chairs, they have mansions, and they do activities as we do. And the Brahma came and put his knee down on the earth and paid respect to the Buddha even. So with the involvement of Kaya Viññati, Kaya Dwara into the context, the Brahma explanation becomes really tough.
Okay, so with that, really my final thinking is that what you explained, by taking that into account, the mind process itself should produce the intensity, it must be varying the intensity of Chittakiriya Vayodhatu, with maybe different intensities of the intention. So Chetana may be happening at so many different levels, and based on that, the Jnana Chittas will be having different strengths to regulate and make it a smooth process, so that the movement takes place in a desired manner.
Yes, but it's a fundamental theory that Javana Chittas of the five sense processes do not produce Viññati. It's a very basic fund.
I am talking about the mind dose.
Yes, mind dose. They only mind dose is involved in these activities. Yeah, it takes help from the senses to understand where it is and what to do and all these things. But the Chittakiriya Vayodhatu is produced by the Chetana in the mind dose. And I explain this like how there are opinions and also.
The level of intensity has to be taken into consideration to give the connection where certain mind process do not physically move the body.
Yes, intensity.
Certain mind process move, even though the overall intention may be the same. So therefore there must be a degree of force, or we call it the degree of the power involved, or the, something like that, which some are not powerful enough to move the physical body, but some are more powerful, which can cause the movement.
That is basically because of the weakness of the body, because now chittas do have different grading. Some chittas can produce viññati, some chittas cannot produce viññati, some chittas are weak to produce viññati, some chittas involved in different activities. So there are different gradings of the consciousness. At the same time, the physical body also is very relevant for the actions to take place, because even though Chittakiriya Vayodhatu happens, sometimes it may not be able to move the body. So intensity does play a huge role.
Thank you very much, sir. Namaskar,
Okay.
Because you gave me a lot of new points to clear my thoughts.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then we'll conclude the lecture for today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And yes, we next day we are going to discuss about the extension of this topic and how this Chittad Rupas are involved in Chetan on the view of a doer, and we'll focus on the approach taken by Abhidharma Avatara, and I'll repeat the basic points we discussed today. And also we move on to talk about how a decision is being made in physical activities, which will be a very interesting topic, but I'm not going to press it too hard. I'll just touch upon it and move into the next topic of Chitta, Rupas related to Chitta, and then we can conclude the Chitta Rupas and move on to Utuja Rupa topic. Okay, wish you all the best, and may this merit of discussing Dhamma help us to attain the final liberation of Nibbana, and for the and may it help and may it sustain the Buddha Sasana. Buddha Sasanang Chirantiktatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantiktatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantiktatu, Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu.